It's so weird to talk about this. A spoiler talking. I love it.
Cool. Hi, Navid. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Very good, very good. Thank you for taking the time to do this. Oh, wow, I can see the
Of
little nicks
course.
behind you. That was perfect.
Yeah, always. Nix never leaves our side. Whether we
And
like it or not, Nix is always there.
I get like a good place to start might be just like a tiny bit of background on yourself. I
Sure.
gather that you're quite a big Star Wars fan, right? So this was quite a big deal for you to kind of get this role.
Yeah, so I'm a narrative director at Ubisoft. I've been here 14 years. So I've worked on a lot of different brands. Splinter Cell, a lot of years on the Far Cry brand, and then this really was a dream come true. It was very much Star Wars fan growing up as a kid. It was like a way for my family, I think, really to bond, and used to play with the toys and all those things. So it was pretty daunting at first, to join, but I think as well, um, it was really exciting to sort of put that on the shelf a bit and actually, yes, we want to honor Star Wars, but like, how can we bring our own spin to it? What do we bring that's new? So that was really really exciting for us. Yeah.
Nice. And you kind of have that structure to the game, especially in that kind of middle segment where you're kind of going around to the different planets and
Yeah.
recruiting the different kind of experts for your heist. Was that always the structure you had in mind, or did you kind of land on that after kind of a little bit of back and forth?
Very much so. I think we were really inspired by heists in general, right? Like when you enter into that sort of space, and this is where you start to move outside of Star Wars a little bit. But you look at Ocean's 11, you look at all these great heist films, and there is that joy of like assembling a crew and bringing people together, and then as a writer you bring all these distinct personalities into the game, and that's really, I think, where Star Wars shines, right? Is in its characters, right? And whether it's in their design or it's in their worldview. So once we started honing around that, a few things started to happen. Was one, we knew for this sort of big adventure for Kay, as sort of an outlaw, that the natural next step is to go on a major heist. But once you start talking about assembling a crew, it started to factor as well into our skill tree. So you might remember there's various experts within the world, that'll help you with your skills and help train you, and so that also factored in to, not only are you gonna like get to assemble a crew, but you're also going to learn from folks that might not necessarily take part in the heist, but are just interesting characters to be around. So I think that was really the main thrust. We always tried to keep tied to the meta of the story, but there's so much joy in meeting new characters that it was important to us.
Definitely. And like part of the fun is kind of going to these different planets, and you've kind of got a main quest and lots of other stuff to kind of to follow on each one.
Yeah.
I was wondering, how did you decide on the planets, and was there ever going to be a load more, like more of like a Mass Effect or something, where there's kind of a million different
Right.
planets, and some of them are more populated than others, or did you always kind of want kind of more bespoke little set of things?
I don't remember there ever being a discussion to go beyond those planets. I think what was important to us was that we really wanted, when you landed on a planet, to have a really like catered sort of experience, lived in. You could feel the history, the demographics. We had an amazing world team, and when the world team, they had these, documentation and things about the world that you wouldn't even think to look for or know about, but it was researched and fleshed out. And their approach was like, you look at the demographics, you look at the biomes, you look at the flora, the fauna, and all these things. And I think to really nail that, we wanted to focus on those 5 planets, so that they would have that kind of iconic feel. And then picking what planets was like incredibly difficult. We knew early on that we wanted to do a new planet like Tashara, sort of this hub of the underworld. But choosing between planets like Akiva, Kijimi and Tatooine. Tatooine was another one that was really exciting because there is that sense of virtual tourism, like seeing that in an open world game, and giving players that dream of just wandering through Mos Eisley and then taking off towards Tashi Station. I think we couldn't really pass that up. So what it sort of became, though, was how are we varying the biomes? Like, that's also important to Star Wars, whether it's an ice planet, a desert planet, that kind of thing. But also, how does it fit into the journey through the underworld? And so we wanted that spectrum for K, where, going into Tashara, this is really like getting thrown into the deep end. But then going to Kijimi, so Tashara is more like a primer, you could say, of the underworld. But then going to something like Kijimi, where there's some more nuance there, where you have 2 essentially syndicates, like going at it in almost this underworld civil war type thing. And then there's a dynastic issue there as well. So we wanted to flesh out each planet in a way that would serve Kay's story. And it really comes about very organically. But yeah, a lot of debates, a lot of questions. Yeah, a lot of research for sure.
Were there any others that you kind of started looking at and then kind of moved off of? Like, I know like Nar Shaddaa gets a few mentions in there and stuff like that.
I mean, I think, for me, Nar Shaddaa is a bucket list item. But I think I'll keep some of those in the pocket. You never know, right? But no, I think we, when we were looking at the journey and looking at how to balance that, like I said, it's all about sort of this organic balance in Kay's story. It really came about, which planets came about pretty fast.
Nice. And I love that phrase, virtual tourism. I hadn't thought of it like that. But
Yeah, yeah,
once I saw that you could go to the Lars homestead, I was like, okay, I've got to get
yeah,
back to Tatooine. I've got to go do that straight away.
yeah. There you go. Yeah. But
And
also
then I went,
through fresh eyes, right? I think
mm,
that's that was exciting to us as well. But yeah, there is that aspect. Yeah,
I did go down a bit of a rabbit hole on Reddit of people trying to work out if Ben Kenobi's hut was somewhere
yeah,
to be
yeah,
found.
yeah, yeah,
Can you
yeah, yeah.
confirm or deny? There was like people like
Yeah,
maybe it's in this far
so
distant corner.
I want to be careful with that stuff because
Yeah.
you don't want to spoil it. Oh, this is also a spoiler free discussion. This is very weird for me, by the way. used to having to hold back. But I will shout out though, the Reddit community has been amazing, and so they know, like, we look at all that stuff and we love seeing the passion, the feedback, the ideas. Like it's been awesome. It's been super awesome.
Nice. And I bet there's stuff that you and the team are like, when someone finds it, you're like, yes, someone find it. Also, if they
Oh
don't
yeah,
find it, you're like, it's still out there.
yeah, exactly. And so there is that little bit of like, there's a few things that I think remain to be discovered. But like, we'll be surprised. It's like someone will pull something out, and it's like we hit it on a data pad buried somewhere. It's like no one's gonna see this, and sure enough, it pops up. But yeah, there's a lot of inside jokes and things like that. I think people really love the melodramas, the holodramas as well. It goes on and on, but yeah, no, it's awesome.
Definitely. And one thing else I was wondering about was there ever like more of a squad mechanic or something like that? 'Cause it kind of
Mm.
feels like sometimes it'd be cool to be able to bring, a couple of the people you recruit out with you a bit more often on like day to day stuff.
Yeah, not so much that I recall. I think really the focus was on Kay and Nyx to a certain extent, and I think as well. It's important to remember this really was meant to be kind of an origin story where sort of the hub of this thing is really Kay Nyx and ND5. And so we were really a little more focused on that aspect, and we wanted to as well kind of culminate to the heist. So there is moments, where you're sort of, working with different characters, but the heist was meant to feel like it kind of organically came together, where Ankh has their role, Gadik has their role, and all that kind of thing. So there wasn't too much discussion on that. I think the big focus was like, how do we make Kay and Nyx especially feel like a satisfying gameplay loop? How do we make that work really well, and how do we like create that bond between the two of them? But yeah, I don't know that we went down that thread too much.
Fair, fair. It does make it all the more cool when like there's a couple of missions when ND5 is kind of in the room with you and stuff. Makes it a
That's
bit more
it.
special, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah,
I wanted,
exactly.
yeah, I wanted to ask about. You mentioned kind of trying to really laser in on that relationship with Nyx. And
Mm,
one of the kind of standout missions for me was when Nyx gets kidnapped, or whatever
right.
the correct word is.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the
Stolen,
thinking
I
behind
guess.
that mission and like crafting it? And because it really, it's when you realize, oh, I really care for this little guy. When you take him away, it's like, oh God, like drop everything. I've got to go get this guy back.
I remember, like, we had story rooms at the start of this, and really it's like a TV writer's room. We bring everyone in, and you have a loose outline, but it's like a kind of an epic jam session that goes on for weeks. The moment I saw KNX or wrote KNX on the whiteboard, or it might have been remote at that point, but I knew we had to take Nyx away from K in a really heartbreaking way, and I was like, this is going to be painful. And I remember before the game, oh, this might have been when we announced, but people were like, I think there were even articles of like, don't you dare do anything to Nyx. Like, I will hunt you down, I will find you. But that came about, it was a little bit like, was it like Chekhov's gun or that kind of thing, where it's like they are so closely intertwined, and Nyx was structured in a way, and we tried to plant this very early on, where you have Bram, who is the owner of the cantina that Kay lives in, where she doesn't really realize how much he's looking out for her, necessarily appreciate it. But then there's Nyx, and we tried to really plant the seeds of like, Kay doesn't necessarily see these people looking out for her. She's like focused all her energy on Nyx. Nyx is the only one that understands her. Nyx is the only one that can protect her, or she can protect him. And if you think about it, we knew that in this journey, Nyx is really the only other person. And I think I have two cats. There's dog owners out there that would vouch for this. Is like, our pets survive relationships. They survive, moving house. They survive all these moments in our history that maybe, and they're so personal to us. They're so close to us. They see us in our most vulnerable, that in a lot of ways, sometimes you're closer to them than you are to your own family. So we were trying to really build that in with Kay early on, and it's even to the further point of she doesn't really have any other family. That when we got to Tatooine and we started looking at Hoss, and I don't know how many people caught on to this, but that Hoss is really like what Kay could become. Hoss as a character, sort of underworld type, of really gone completely cynical, has really burned every bridge, really only thought for themselves. Like, Hoss is kind of that a potential path for Kay. And And we wanted to really make a clean break, a moment where Kay feels that that's not where I'm going to go, right? And the way to do that is like Haas is so ruthless that he would think nothing of tearing Nix away from Kay and giving him up to the Hutts. And even to the point when you look at it, when Kay's knocked out and she wakes up, Haas is like, what? All this is over some creature? Like, I don't get it, right? And so that was really like story-wise kind of the genesis of that. And I think also, I'm just going on. You can jump in anytime. I could talk about this stuff for hours. But like, I think also it's the first moment or one of the early moments, or can be early moments, where ND5, his cynicism and lack of faith in humanity breaks away a bit, where, you know, they've been riffing, there's jokes on both sides and pokes and things like that, but Kay's not having any of it, right? And I saw a few people mention, like, when they play, that tends to be the thing that hits hard, is like ND5's reaction as well, of like, oh, okay, this is life and death for you. So a lot of thought went into it, and it's been super amazing to just see, you know, people feel so emotionally connected to that moment, because like the hard work is paid off a little bit, but you always feel also a little bad, like sorry, but we have to.
Similar but different. Another moment that really hits like emotionally is when ND5's programming makes him, you know, kind of turn on Kay in that kind of
Right.
quite late game segment.
Yeah.
Again, what was the thinking there? What are like the levers you pulled to make something like that really kind of have an impact?
Yeah, that's a great question. We really wanted to. We worked very hard to lull players into a sense of security around ND5. I think, you know, early on, if you look at his function in the whole heist, he's really just meant to make sure Kay follows through with the job. It's the only reason he's really there, according to Jaylen. And we had presented, we worked to make sure that we presented ND5. Yes, they have an antagonistic relationship, but it's almost like this buddy movie, you know, where you're poking fun at each other, but you're also going on adventures. And ND5 rescues Kay and Tatooine, and, you know, Kay is looking out, you know, for ND5, you know, when he gets injured. And so it was really to lull you into a sense that, like, hey, even though we're quipping and that kind of thing, we're buddies, we're friends. And then we really wanted to just pull the rug out from under you. And when it's so weird to talk about this spoiler talking, I love it. But when we pull the rug out is after the heist, and that moment we really wanted to hammer home two things. Is one, ND5 is Jaylen's servant and is in a toxic relationship with Jaylen, and to the point that, you know, he uses that device to electrocute him. And then two, that ND5 is rethinking his role in all of this and his own worldview after, you know, growing with Kay. And that's where sort of the line where he's saying, "It's not me, Kay," you know, as he stuns her. And then once you move into the end game, that sort of whole section came about of, well, the heist's over. What does Kay have left to fight for? And our sort of like trick that we'd been keeping in the back pocket for the whole game, sort of building to, was like, well, everyone managed to live except ND5, right? Everyone managed to be free sorry, I should say live, but everyone managed to, like, okay, you got burned like you do in the underworld, but now you're going to move on with your life, right? Except for ND5 and to a certain extent Asara as well. So they ended up, actually, both of those characters ended up, what's the word? Representations of the two themes throughout the game. One is Kay can think or care less of the rebels, but she somehow keeps getting roped in to helping them. So that's the Asara side. But then the other side is, she has found a brother, some family, and without her even realizing it. And so one of the really important things for that last section, that last mission was, and it actually came quite late, was when Jaylen sends ND5 after Kay, to have this really, messed up dynamic of he's going out to kill her, but verbally he's telling her just to leave, get out of here. What are you doing? And that it seems like that's resonated a bit, of like, you get a sense of why it was so important for him to talk to her simultaneously, because the more he talks, the more you realize you have to save this guy, right? Oh, I hope you're not it's like sat too still in the room. But the more you run, because of what he's saying, the more you realize you need to help him. So it came about as we were in development very clearly that this is actually really the story of Kay and ND5, growing together and moving beyond sort of the trauma that they're carrying. So yeah, it's a very long-winded answer, but it's been a few years of production.
Yeah. No, it leads me straight into a moment. It's not very often that I will kind of, shed a tear during a game,
Right.
especially if it's especially when it's not an outwardly sad bit. Like sad bits, can pull your heartstrings fairly easily. But there's that bit when they're back in the Trailblazer, and the hyperdrive's spooled up, and Kay's got her chance to leave, and she kind of hesitates over the like she doesn't punch it, she doesn't pull the lever, and there's that kind of non-verbal moment when ND5 just looks at her and is like, "Right, we're doing this." And you talk about
that gave you a tear.
That moment was like, she doesn't even have to say anything. I don't know why.
So you want to know about that moment? Well, I think it's the culmination of her journey, right? Where she was burned by the rebels. She didn't want anything to do with them. She's been quite selfish. She was quite selfish for so long. I've got everybody I can leave, but I'm literally potentially sacrificing everything to help my friends and help people that are suffering. That shot was obsessed over so much. It makes me so happy that it registered. Then I'm going to tell our cinematics director, because we were like, oh, are they going to get it? No, you should hang longer. No, are they going to get it? Like the hesitation, just like the hand, how long we spend on the hand. Like we were obsessed for months to try and get. So that makes me really happy. But I think the character of Kay, in a lot of ways, sort of as I was getting at, we really wanted to move away a little bit from the idea of the rebellion and this thought of the Empire and the Sith and the Jedi and all of that. And that moment, interestingly, I think culminates a lot of that, even though she's helping the rebels. What I'm proud of that our team kind of pulled off is, like, you don't feel like she's part of the rebellion when she does it. And I think that's sort of the secret sauce of that moment, is like, no, she's just doing it to help people. And I think that's the essence of Kay, is she's not necessarily looking to join some organization, but she always punches up, she'll never punch down. And so anyway, that's awesome that you caught that. I really, really like that. I'll tell the team as well.
Please do.
Absolutely will.
I might just take that moment to kind of jump into some totally different stuff.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
thought it was really interesting because I by no means, Pablo Hidalgo knows everything kind of thing, but I
Right.
liked. I've read a few Star Wars books, a few comics and stuff over the years,
Cool.
and I found it a really fun mix of stuff that you have in there. Like you have Kira, you have.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed all the Temin Wexley kind of aftermath
Yep.
trilogy kind of vibe kind of stuff,
Yep.
and then you've got obviously some original trilogy stuff. You've got Lando. How did you
Yeah.
like? What's the process like of saying, "Oh, we want to use this character," and then how much
Mm.
research you have to do to find what has already been done and what gaps you can kind of move into and stuff.
Well, I think that's where our partnership with Lucasfilm Games has really been amazing, because they have folks there within their group that just are encyclopedias about everything that's going on. And folks like Matt Martin, Steve Blank, these people know the history and know what's going on inside out. And they were just really supportive. So a lot of those characters came contextually, right? And what was really important, and I hope people felt, was we weren't really looking for cameos. We were looking for characters that made sense in the world and if they would move Kay's story along. So Kira, for example, is another path for Kay that she could end up in, and she very much serves that purpose, right? Of like, at first you're like, oh, Kira, this is awesome, and then you're like, oh, Kira, she's got an agenda, during this time period. And then folks like Lando, scoundrels and underworld figures that make sense in her journey. Then we do a lot of our own research, and I will shout out John Bjorling, our associate narrative director, who's like the oracle, has read and seen everything. But Lucasfilm is very, very open with us. There wasn't a single character where it was like, oh no, don't go there, or things like that. They were super, super supportive. So first they want to know how we're using them, right? And we sort of take them through that and sort of like our documents and our meetings with them. But then it just becomes a really organic process. Like I was a little scared when we started, like, yeah, we're going to go for Lando and see, see how this goes. But they were super supportive. And I think when they saw as well that it was grounded in context and it was grounded in Kay's journey, I think they just got really excited just as much as we did.
Nice, nice. And am I right in saying that of the DLCs coming up, is it the first one that I think it's got Lando in the kind of promo
Yeah.
image for it, right?
Yeah,
So,
wild
is there anything you
card.
can kind of tease or say or anything?
It's, I was just playing it last week. It's so much fun. I think, you get to experiment a bit in DLCs as well. So there's a lot of fun surprises there. And it's really meant to be sort of that, Star Wars casino fantasy, right? Come to life. And so Kay goes on this journey where she's taking part in a massive sabacc tournament on this luxury cruiser, and look who happens to be competing in the same tournament, Lando Calrissian. But and they both have competing agendas in this thing. So there's a whole lot of new characters. There's beyond Lando, and the feeling of going onto that cruiser is the best. So I'm just excited for people to play it. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun.
It's cool. I've been reading that Shadow of the Sith book, which has lots of kind of
Right.
Lando.
Yep.
It starts with him in a sabacc
Further
tournament.
ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's further ahead, but it still feels like the same character, which is
That's
pretty
it.
cool.
Yeah. No, it's such a fun character to write for. And our approach with Lando this time is a little bit like, this isn't General Lando, right? This is right after Empire Strikes Back. So he's still a little bit more underworld, still a little bit of that scoundrel. So yeah, it should be fun.
Nice. I wanted to ask you about your uh, I thought quite restrained but still very powerful use of Darth Vader in those kind of two scenes
Right.
that I've seen anyway involving him. Um, I was wondering, is that a particularly hard character to get? And also, what were your thoughts about? We don't want to use him too much. We don't want it to become like a now Vader's hunting you, that
Yeah.
because that kind of changes the game surely at that point. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, so a lot of thought went into the Vader scene, as you can imagine, but it came from a really simple place, and I, right from the beginning, I just had this thought, this image in my head of so often we see Darth Vader hurting folks with the Force kind of physically, right? The Force choke or that kind of thing. And so the idea was, well, let's see him destroy everything but the person, and play with the inverse. And that's really the genesis of it. Is like, and it was also a bit of a throwback to, A New Hope, where Sliro is really out of line. Like, we've built up, I think maybe we've forgotten a little bit, like the generals and the folks, a lot of them weren't big fans of Vader, or even some of them weren't necessarily scared of him. And we really wanted to bring that feeling back of Sliro's not into this like Sith Jedi, this is just some like sorcerer, walking around, that he couldn't care less about. And so we really wanted to have him go at Vader to the point that you're starting to get uncomfortable and like, dude, just chill, like, stop. Do you know who you're talking to? And the team, the Cinemax team, just did an amazing job, with the glass cracking, the feeling of Sliro dropping, and then just having this, like, the idea was like a cloud of glass over his head. They just went into every type of detail you can imagine, but that's honestly, I don't know, that's one of the proudest moments of my career, is to write that scene and see it through to the end, but it all, as tricky as Vader can be, there was two things. One, we never wanted to deviate from that initial idea of destroying everything but the person, and then also that he's serving a specific point in the story, which is to reveal that Sliro is ISB, and that all of this Zarek Besh business is tied to that. But we don't want to make the rest of the game about Vader, right? It's not that story. It's about the underworld. It's about the Empire's connection to the underworld. And Vader as a character is someone who dips in and out. He doesn't live in it like Sliro would. So yeah, it was an incredibly exciting thing to be a part of.
I just love that shot when all the glass is just kind of like hanging there.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
It's like,
I wanted that shot to last like 5-10 minutes. It was like, just stay there. It'll be amazing. It was, yeah, they did a great job. Yeah.
nice. And speaking of Sliro, you have that kind of quite late in the day twist about the ISB, but then about Jaylen being his brother as well. And I
Yeah.
must confess, I did not. You're playing a game, you're always kind of trying to guess where it's going to go, and I
Yeah.
completely didn't see that coming.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, was that always in the plan from day one, and did you kind of go to lengths to try and keep the characters separate as you go along? Like,
Very early, it was in the plan, and we there's a bit of a mirror there with Kay and Rico, Sliro and Jaylen. It's like these are folks that have unresolved trauma with their family, right? Which is a bit of a theme throughout the game. And it's right there in the first scene. He talks about his brother, taking food off the table, and I was always nervous that everyone would get it the moment that scene ended, where you first meet Jaylen, but a lot didn't, it seems, and yeah, I think it was always sort of part of the plan, and I think as well, like I said, we tried to bury the lead as much as we can, and to the point oh man, there were so many things we were toying with, but aside from the brothers thing, even just Sliro being ISB was a very tricky thing to hide. It's like, don't use the last name. He's just Sliro and that's it. Actually Sliro appears in a Marvel comic before we even released, and people picked up on it later that it was this ISB character that was bathed in shadow. So yeah, we you can find it. We went to great lengths to keep it hidden, but I think it all went back to how much, and I think that's so important in storytelling, is like, it doesn't matter what the setting is. If I can't relate to that in my kitchen table, at Thanksgiving dinner, it's always going to feel a bit surface. And so that was one of those things where it's like everyone could relate to being jealous of a sibling, and so it was really, really important.
It's interesting, like talking to you. It seems like, yeah, that kind of interpersonal, inter-character relationships were a lot more interesting to you than the big macro Star Wars elements. 'Cause I must confess, as I was going
Yeah.
through it, my prediction was, oh yeah, she's going to join the rebels. They're going to have
Yeah.
like,
I
they're going to
wanted you
discover
to
that,
feel that.
yeah, they're going to discover the second Death Star or something. I didn't like. I was like,
Yeah.
is
No,
that where
we
you're predicting people to
actively
go? Yeah,
we actively wanted it to feel like she should be joining the rebels if I'm looking at the history books, but Kay is not doing it. That's not the character, and I think that's, we really wanted to bring also I think like a kind of a modern take on the idea of like, she's someone that just distrusts anything organized to a certain extent, right? And so when she looks at the rebels and she looks at the Empire, like obviously the Empire is to a whole other extent of subjugation, but she just sees structures of power. Like to her, it's like, well, who's coming after the Empire? Who's in charge then? So we knew that folks would be feeling that urge, but we knew from the beginning she was never going to do that. It just wasn't her character. Yeah.
another thing that I was so busy trying to predict that I didn't see. I didn't predict at all that Rico would show up in like the modern day part of the
Right. That's great.
storyline.
That's great. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
no, you go, you go.
No, that was that scene was very tricky to write. Um, and the team did a fantastic job with it. I think it was really meant to be like a sucker punch to the gut, and when you look at, and also an understanding of how manipulative Jaylen is, right? What is the idea there is he's sensing that ND5 and K are getting closer, that, she's gaining notoriety, she's doing well. What's the one thing that I can keep her off balance but still working for me? Her mother. And so, yeah, it was, on set, like Umberly did a great job, and Nicola did as well. It was awesome. Yeah.
Definitely. It's like when you only see a character in a flashback, you assume that, oh, the flashbacks are going to end with her tragic demise or whatever. But then it's like,
Yeah.
oh, actually no,
Yeah.
she's still around.
Yeah. And what was important with Rico as well is we didn't necessarily want her to be this heroic figure at all. Like her heroic moment is to say, like, I'm addicted to this underworld life and I'm going to get my kid killed if I keep her around. So my heroism is to abandon her. Like, it's pretty dark and doesn't quite fully make sense to anyone except Rico, but it comes from heart, right? It comes from a place of heart. She thinks she's doing the right thing. And so, yeah, it was all about bearing the lead on that stuff. We didn't want to, we needed to keep a couple of punches there for the end. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you have that little is it post credits or mid credits? That kind of little button
Mid
on the
credits,
end,
yeah.
yeah, where Kay works it out that she was tracking her with the chip, and she's going to go and bust
Oh
her out
man.
of the Imperial thing. Uh,
Yeah.
by that point, to what point do you think they have kind of repaired their relationship, or is it more like we're very different, we maybe don't get along, but I'm not going to let you kind of rot in a cell kind of thing?
I think there's just the way I would put it is like, because we wanted to keep the sort of complexity of life, right? And I think it really is like there's a little bit of redemption for Rico, and also I think for Kay it's like this is repaired, but I don't need you in my life. I don't need to think about you anymore, But I'm going to stop using you, like blaming you for everything. I'm going to stop thinking about you, and there's a deep part of me that will always love you, right? But I'm not looking to. There's not a hole I need to fill anymore. And what's crucial about that, I think, is Kay's cynicism throughout a lot of the game, her trust. And I don't know if folks picked up on this, but if you go back and look at the scene before that one, when Kay's saying bye to everybody in the cantina, everyone's sort of splitting off, and she walks to the Trailblazer. That scene is meant to be like Kay has been carrying the baggage of her mother's abandonment and using it as a reason not to trust anyone for so long. But then she gets to the Trailblazer, and it's the only time in the game that willingly Nix isn't with Kay. He's with ND5, right? The whole game you've had Nix with Kay. You've had Nix as her companion. Nix is, always there. But it's the first time in the game that Nix willingly is comfortable to leave Kay and is curled up on the seat next to ND5 sleeping. And that is to show like this is her family now, right? To the point that Nix trusts someone else. So it's meant to show, it's almost like it's paired to the scene with Rico to say like, I've got my family, I recognize, even if you don't want to admit it, you cared about me and it's time to move on. Right. And then you just tie it up in a bow. So yeah, that's what how that scene came about. Getting the swap, because if you notice, she swaps the chip for oh my god, the lockpick. Getting that right was a nightmare. The timing of like, and then people sort of being like, well, isn't it going to be obvious? Like, how are you going to hide it? And it's like, we'll fix it in post. It's going to be fun. But yeah, we're really proud of that scene, and the team worked super, super hard on getting that right. It's kind of the culmination of really a lot of the themes of the game.
I guess the only other thing I was really wondering about is probably the thing you can talk about the least. Is kind of like you say, that story is quite wrapped up nicely at the end there. You've got these two DLCs.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to see more from Kay beyond that? Are you hoping she's going to show up in another game or in a live action something, or kind of what are your kind of hopes and
I
dreams at
mean,
this point?
I love the character. Like, I mean, what can I say? My brain is so focused on post-launch, to be honest, right now. Like, we're actually shooting scenes for our DLC, the Pirate's Fortune DLC, which has been announced with Hondo, like right now. So, that's where my brain's at. I mean, I'd love to see more K. There's no question. But yeah, that's where my head's out. Or my head's at. I just sounded very Canadian there. Out. But yeah, that's where I'm at.
Nice. It must be cool. Like whenever people always talk about Star Wars as like a toy box, but it must be cool that you've put some new toys in there as well. And there's a chance that someone else might do something with some of them.
Yeah, I mean, that's whether it's K or ND5, like there's a love for the characters, and you're seeing some of the Nick's work that's been like puppeteering that's been happening, and people creating their own Nixes, and there's some ND5 cosplay going on. So like I think there's a real love out there for these characters, and like I think for the entire team, the narrative team, everybody, it's like it's just an honor to be able to like add to that, and I'm all for seeing wherever those characters can go. It's this is dream come true stuff, right?
Definitely. And is there anything? Are you allowed to say anything about that second DLC, or is that one more kind of shrouded in
Yeah, I
secrecy at the
mean,
moment?
well, I can say that it's unbelievably exciting that it's a pirate story, and you can't have a pirate story in Star Wars without Hondo and Naka, and so bringing Hondo back, I think, and sort of the way we're bringing him back, I think fans are gonna love. At least I hope they do, and so really like we're going full on with the sort of pirate underworld mixture, and I think I have to leave it at that. But there's a lot to look forward to.
No, it sounds good. I look forward to playing it. Well, thank you so much for taking all this time to chat about the game, and
Pleasure.
congrats on the game.
Thank you so much.